And just to interrupt our program before I get to the last book, I'm gonna ramble. So I feel like almost Evelyn Hugo with murder. That sounded very Molly Shannon. I loved it. Dang it, why didn't I write anybody's names in the books? Hold please. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to the first part of all the books that I read in September. So it is almost the end of September and I am cautiously optimistic that I'm definitely going to finish one book. I think two is probably pushing it, but I have read so many great books. I did series September, so I definitely tried to focus on some series, and then I mood read. It's just what I like to do, as you guys know. But I have a whole bunch of books to talk about, so we're just gonna get right into them because you guys know I tend to ramble on and on and on. So, first book I have is Bad Summer People by Emma Rosenblum. So I picked this up for Labor Day weekend because I wanted to seasonally finish out my summer, because I definitely am one of these people who is like, Labor Day means it's fall, even though I know. But I wanted to read this as like a last hurrah for summer. So I actually wound up doing a combination of physically reading it and listening to the audiobook, which was read by January LaVoy. And I enjoyed this one for sure. This is one of those books that definitely has a premise that gets me, in that on the first page of the book, we know that somebody is dead. And then we go back in time and we meet all the suspects and we meet all the potential victims, and we have to piece together what led to that body being found on page 1 of the book. So in this one, we have a group of friends, couples that go to their house on Fire Island, and they go every summer, and small town, a lot of regulars that go there, a lot of people who know each other, a lot of history between all of them. And of course, a lot of dark and messed upness going on, lots of secrets, lots of lies, this is very rich people behaving badly, which is another one of my sweet spots. So I would say it was a little bit slow to get into, but once it did pick up steam, it was like, whew, like totally flew through it. And I definitely think I was helped by the audiobook. And I find that oftentimes with books, that if I'm having a challenge getting into a book for one reason or another, if I switch what I'm doing, so like if I'm listening to it, but maybe I'm having a problem, or maybe it's a book where I'm like, ooh, I definitely want to physically read this and like be immersed in it, I'll switch to the other option. And kind of conversely, if it either feels a little bit slow to me, or in the case of when I was reading this one, there was other stuff I wanted to be doing, like going for a walk and cleaning, which is my procrastination tool from doing other things in life. I wanted to have something to listen to, so that's why I consumed this in 2 ways, and I binged it. I don't even know if I read it in like 2 days or something like that. It's not that big of a book, but I think if you like the dark and messed up nature of it, I think if you like sort of these complicated friend groups, married couples, it's definitely like all the bad behaviors. So I would say kind of on par with a May Cobb, The Hunting Wives, like kind of in that vein. So not her latest book, but sort of her earlier books. I would say maybe even a little bit like The Block Party by Jamie Day, which came out pretty recently. And we get to see multiple POVs in this. And like it's told over certain days throughout the course of a summer. And I do think if you are a veteran of the thriller genre, you might be able to piece together some things. And I just had delicious fun with it. So again, if you're just like down for kind of like some soapy, fun, bingeable stuff, this would definitely be a good one to read. Okay, the next book I have for series September is, I read The Family Remains. I had pulled both of these books because I had done an Instagram post and I kind of put them both into my basket. So this is by Jewell. So Family Upstairs is book number 1, which came out, I always see these things and I'm like, I try and guess when they came out when I'm actually sitting here holding the book. So let's not guess. This came out in 2019. I don't know why I thought it was older than that. And then even though this book wraps itself up, there is some, I would say, like doors open, and there was a lot of fanfare for people asking Jewell to do a book number 2. And she's not one for a sequel or a part 2 book, but she did it with this one. And this book was so fantastic. I'm sorry, it has a shiny cover, so it's probably blinding or hard to see. But The Family Remains was such great fun. So hard to talk about talk about this one for a minute. So in this one, we are following 3 POVs, and our main character is Libby, and it's her 25th birthday, and she returns home, like kind of the premises, to get this letter that she's been waiting for her whole life, and she finally is going to find out who she is, because she was adopted when she was just a baby, like just a few months old, and on her 25th birthday, she's going to find out her true identity. And she finds out that she had inherited this amazing home on the Thames in Chelsea. And nearly 25 years ago, the police were called to this house, which is 16 Cheyenne Walk, with reports of a baby crying. And it says, in the kitchen, 3 dead bodies, all dressed in black, were seemingly posed next to a hastily scrawled note. The 4 other children reported to live at Cheyenne Walk were gone. So this is a book trying to figure out what happened in this house, who is Libby, who is her family. And we, like I said, we get multiple POVs, we get multiple timelines, and the characters are amazing. The story is absolutely amazing. And then in this book, we get to pick up with some of our characters. We get to meet some new characters. So without giving anything away, and I kind of don't even want to tell you who shows up in both books because I don't want to like give away anything from book number 1. But in book number 2, the book opens with the bones of a body being found in the River Thames. And we have a police investigation, and then we have some of our friends from book number 1, and then some new people, and it takes us to Chicago, and it's just a really fun unraveling and very fun to catch up with our characters. So this takes place about a year later. And I just loved it. I loved it so much. I'd heard so many amazing things about it. I feel like I loved these books equally but differently, if that makes sense. Like they're both definitely 5-star reads for me. And it has helped secure my read to 0 for Lisa Jewell. So if you saw my August part 2 wrap up, I read None of This Is True, which is her latest thriller, which got me on a kick to read this. And then you'll hear about in part 2 of September, I read the only other sequel that she's ever written, which is called After the Party. But I'm officially on my kick to read all of her books, which is going to be a whole separate video in and of itself. And I maybe went out and bought some of her older books that I didn't have. So anyway, if you have not read Lisa Jewell, I highly recommend it. This is one of those books where like I've heard people say like you can read it as a standalone, but it definitely won't have the same impact without having read book 1. So I definitely would recommend them both. I think you could easily binge these books. You definitely won't be sorry if you read both of these books. And she's just so smart and clever. She has such great writing style. I feel like her humor is so spot on. She is one of these authors that to me kind of goes surprisingly dark, and I think part of it feels surprising to me because I was introduced to her with her, what she calls her pop fiction books, which was like focused on romance, kind of 20-somethings, 30-somethings, like coming of age in your 20s and 30s, marriage, sort of complex relationships, finding your first jobs, just like living in the job world, getting your apartment, like that, very relationshipy books. So she didn't always write about murder. So I feel like she's such a great kind of morphed into this great mystery, but still super character driven, but just, I don't know. I'm just such a fan of her. She's definitely one of my writing heroes. And I loved The Family Remains so much. So much. So much, so much, so much. Okay, my next series September read, which unintentionally matches my outfit, is The Firm by John Grisham. Did not plan that. Just love a green. So this is, everything is so shiny today. I'm sorry, you guys. This is book number 1 now in the Mitch McDear series. So book number 2 comes out in October. I pre-ordered it. I definitely wanted to reread this before the new book comes out. And I loved it all over again. That sounded very Molly Shannon. I loved it. So I read this back in the 90s. And this was 1000% my gateway into the legal thriller genre, and it was my first Grisham, and I just absolutely had such a blast with it. So I remember when I read this, just having no idea kind of what was in store for me. And I had been reading pretty widely at that time, but there's definitely a different feel to a legal thriller. Even though I had been reading detective stories and mysteries, I definitely had not jumped into this. And I just remember compulsively reading it and absolutely loving it. And when I did my reread, I actually wound up doing the audiobook of it, and I will fact check who read it in half a minute, and I will include it down below. But I definitely remembered a lot of things about this book in the broad strokes. There were some details that I remembered, but like I wasn't quite sure. It's so funny, like what you do and don't remember. But like, I'd seen the movie before. I definitely had some memory of the movie, which was true to the book. And then definitely some stuff in the movie that I think, or that I know, I should say, I don't think I know, was changed. And I think in many, many ways the book did it better. But I definitely think this was a fun movie. So I did plan to watch the movie in September, which I haven't done yet. I just barely have watched TV at all, and other than baseball. But I definitely want to rewatch the movie just for fun. And I'm really excited to see what happens in book number 2. But on the very off chance you are not familiar with The Firm, which I guess is not really an off chance, not everybody's into this, we are following Mitch McDear, and we meet him when he is graduating from Harvard. He is top of his class. Him and his wife have been together for a bit. They're living in Cambridge, and they basically like barely have 2 pennies to rub together. So he is meeting all these law firms. He is being wooed by so many people, and he winds up getting wooed by this small law firm in Memphis who is offering him kind of the offer you cannot refuse. The money, a brand new BMW, like help getting a new house, like everything, like all the dreams are coming true. And as you can imagine, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So Mitch finds out kind of what's going on at the firm, and it's high stakes and it's fast paced. And it's funny because I remember when I reread The Client a few years ago, and at the time I remember thinking when I first read The Client, I thought, oh, this is such a fast paced legal thriller. And it felt so slow to me the second time I read it, not in a not good book way, but compared to a lot of thrillers we read today. But I very much felt like this held up in terms of pacing. And I don't know if it's because I was listening to it versus reading it, but I very compulsively listened to it, and I had a great time. I really did. And there's definitely more in the book than could be made into the movie in terms of, I think, like every little trick that's played, but I had such a fun time with it. So The Exchange comes out October 17th, I want to say. I talked about it in my October video also. And that picks up 15 years later. So I'm very curious to see, because when last we saw Mitch, he was in one place. And it sounds like when we meet Mitch again, he's in a whole different place. So I'll be very interested to see. But huge Grisham fan. I have not read a fraction of his books. I'm not going on record to say I'm going to read him to zero, but I definitely would like to reread a lot of his earlier books. And then I do have some of his more recent ones as well. I did go on a little bit of a Grisham kick in feeling jazzed about him again after I read The Client a couple of years ago. And I do have a fair amount of his books. So no judgment here. It's all good. But I read this and I loved it. Again, a reread. So let me find a book that's not a reread. Oh, and also not in a series. So if you guys are looking for a deliciously dark, messed up, set in Hollywood kind of a book. So I feel like almost Evelyn Hugo with murder and even like a different kind of messed upness. The Hurricane Blonde by Haley Sutton is so great. I heard about this from Kate from Spilling the Tea. There is a great podcast that her and Gare actually have Haley Sutton on it. And I was totally obsessed listening to it, but just hearing Kate talk about this book. So she also has kind of like the Hollywood books are definitely a go-to for her. So in this one, and you can see from the tabs, I just loved so many different things about it. So in this book, we are following a woman named Salma, and she is a former child star. Her dad was a huge actor, and their family really kind of fell into this notoriety when Selma's older sister Tawny, who was an actress, big deal in and of her own right in the 90s, was found murdered at her home, sort of out by the pool. And this murder was never solved. So as you can imagine, that has an impact on a person. And we're meeting Salma all these years later, and she is leading this tour bus guide through LA called Stars 6 Feet Under, and she visits the sites of famous actresses who were murdered. and it's like a tourist attraction going on this true crime tour bus. And when the book opens, they wind up going to her sister's former house, and the body of a woman who looks very much like her sister is found out by the pool. And Selma starts to believe the person who killed her sister, who was never found, is sort of at it again, and she wants to get to the bottom of what happened. So this book is definitely very, very dark. There is dual timelines in this. There is a lot of behind the curtain of Hollywood, and what I found really interesting in that interview that Kate and Gare did is so much of what is described in here as sort of the bad behavior of directors and these things that happen on set are based in fact from different directors over the years. And really this question of like, is it artistic genius? Is there abuse happening here? Like, how much do we forgive people? How much leeway do people have? Like, sort of the lengths people will go to for their art, what actors and actresses will put up with, what they will deal with, what they will do to be able to be picked, to be able to be the star. Like, it's definitely a really dark underbelly of Hollywood. And on top of that, we have these women who were murdered in Hollywood and have become sort of fodder for true crime. And it's really that line between like true crime as entertainment, true crime as people genuinely being interested in learning about the victims and what happened to them and making sure that the perpetrators are caught, and some unsolved mysteries. The biggest one being the Black Dahlia is talked about a lot in this book. And the fascination that people have. So the tagline on the cover of this, which is actually a line from the book, says, "Hollywood loves a dead girl. She is always so photogenic." And it's a really interesting commentary on people's obsession with true crime and people's obsession with Hollywood. But I think so many things that she does amazingly with this, but sort of in a very like similar but different vein to Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. This is very much about the women. And it's just a very fascinating look at that very dark side of things. And it should not be a surprise to say that Selma's a very complicated character. Her relationship with her family remains very complicated. And there's a lot over the years that has played a part in how she got to where she is and who she is today. And her sister's murder, which again has been unsolved since the 90s, definitely is something that haunts her, and it is something that she is definitely obsessed with solving. And it's just a really, really good book. And I had not heard of this until I had heard Kate talking about it, and then I did what Kate did. I went out and got her next book. I was like, where is that? So I haven't read it yet. So this is her first book called The Lady Upstairs. And I believe this is also extremely dark. It's also set in LA. And then this is book number 2. So I don't know if anybody's read these, but I definitely want to give this one a go on the sooner side. But I really enjoyed it. It definitely is in the dark and messed up vein. And I read this, I want to say like right after I read Bright Young Women. So I was really in a dark spot, but it's just very well done. There's disturbing elements to it, as you can probably guess, but it's also really respectfully done in talking about these women. And I just think she does a great job with this book. And I thought it was really just fantastic, just absolutely fantastic. And just to interrupt our program before I get to the last book, The Firm was read by Scott Brick. So again, all of that will be down below, but I realized I never went back and checked that. And actually I went to go check who read Nine Liars, which is the last book I read. Dang it, why didn't I write anybody's names in the books? Hold please. Okay, Nine Liars was read by Kate Rudd, and this is by Maureen Johnson. This is book number 5 in the Truly Devious series. So Truly Devious, if you guys have been here for a while, you've heard me talk about this series. I really enjoyed it. The first 3 books were conceived as a trilogy. The book sort of took off into a stratosphere, and Maureen Johnson continued to write more books. So again, this is another one where I feel like a lot of people will argue you can read it as a standalone, and you totally can. There will just be, I feel like, dynamics of the friendships that maybe will have a little less of an impact because you don't have the history, but I don't think in the grand scheme of things, it will negatively impact your experience reading the book. So if you're not sure if you want to dive into Truly Devious, you can definitely start here. This does not spoil the answers to any of the mysteries in the previous books. So book number 4 is Box in the Woods, which is Stevie and all of her friends work at a summer camp. And you will hear references to mysteries, but not spoilers to those mysteries. So I leave you with that. But Nine Liars takes Stevie and her friends to Oxford for, I don't know, like a week and a half. I feel like they're not there very long. So one of the characters from the books is at Oxford, and for the Thanksgiving break, he invites Stevie and this group of friends who were all friends at Ellingham Academy, where Stevie and her friends are seniors, to kind of spend, I think it's like a week or 10 days in Oxford, sort of under the guise of checking out colleges and having a cultural excursion. But of course, as fate would have it, David, who is the guy at Oxford, one of his friends at school, this girl named Izzy, her aunt was part of a double murder that took place in 1995. So 2 of her aunt's closest friends were murdered while they were all away at a weekend getaway. And it was written off as a robbery gone real wrong, but they never actually found out who was responsible for it. And now some things are bubbling up, and Stevie, of course, loves nothing more than a cold case to solve, which is the entire premise of Truly Devious. So she is on the case and committed to finding out what happened. So in this book, we do get dual timelines. So we get the murder in 1995. We get maps of the grounds, which I absolutely love. So as a big fan of the 90s, I was very excited for the 90s timeline. There's a lot of fantastic 90s pop culture in this. There's great song references. There's great musical references. So we see the night of the murders in the past and everything leading up to it. And then it's obviously interwoven with present day. So one thing I will say is that I found that the book was slow to get started. So we kick off with the 1995 timeline, which I loved. That was not slow at all to me. But when we went back to the Stevie timeline, and I think this is because this book is set up as a potential standalone. So for me, as someone who's been in the entire series and I know who the people are, I don't need that background on everyone. So I feel like it took a little bit too long to get Stevie and her friends on a plane to Oxford. And I almost feel like we could have started with David saying, like, you know what you guys should do for Thanksgiving? Come here and visit me, rather than like some more chapters leading into it. So this is a 445 page book. I don't think it needed to be 445 pages. So I think everything in the past timeline was absolutely necessary. I think what happens once they land in Oxford is totally necessary, but it definitely felt like it was slow to get them there. And I just wanted to get into solving the mystery. I wanted to get into Stevie being there and her figuring stuff out. So this is definitely a YA book. I don't think I said that at the beginning. There's definitely parts of this as a non-YA woman that feel very YA to me. To me, that's not a ding in the book because I know what I'm getting when I get into it. It is not dark and messed up like Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I would put this more on par with The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So it was fun. It was easy in the sense of like, it's a quick read. It's easily digestible. It's definitely a good palate cleanser. It's definitely a good balance to something like this if you're trying to not totally be in the dark and messed up space. And it's just fun. Like, it's just easy breezy fun. It's a good mystery. I had suspicions about some things. And again, I feel like if you're a veteran to the genre, you will pick up on clues. I think she plays fair, which I totally appreciate. So you can lead yourself to certain conclusions. And I think I don't want to say she's obvious. I feel like kind of in a Murder, She Wrote way, it is sometimes a little less subtle when they show you something or mention something where you're like, this is important to know. This is definitely a clue. So I have great fun with it. I love a cozy. This is like very, like I said, not like Good Girl's Guide to Murder. It's definitely very PG. And it was just fun. It was just fun. I made me want to go back to London and London adjacent. And I definitely had great cravings for the 90s. And there's this song, Country House, which is referenced in this book. And it totally just got me excited for that song again. And just like some great, like I said, like pop culture references back to the 90s, which I totally loved. So definitely a good time. Definitely a stunning cover. If you guys are here for the Booktober bingo and leaves on the cover, I can see where that inspiration came from, because I definitely want to read some books that I have with leaves on the cover, but like, she's definitely a beautiful fall cover for sure. So another series September book done. And that's going to do it for the first half of what I read in September. So like I said, working on some other books. I've finished 4. I think I'm going to get 1 more done. And you guys are just going to have to tune back in to find out what they are and if I finish that last one. But I definitely have another contender for like best book of the year that I read. So there's another teaser for you guys. So I'll leave you with that as well. But let me know. I hope everyone had a great reading in September. I hope you guys had a great reading month for September. I hope everyone's doing great. Thanks for being here. Thanks for lasting this long if you have. And if you haven't checked out Booktober Bingo yet, it is back. I will link the video. Even, again, I'm not sure when this one's gonna go up, but you can always catch up. The prompts are definitely super flexible. Anything you've read up until this point is gonna find a place to live somewhere on that bingo board. But I will link that down below for you guys also, and would love to see you there. Would love to see you back here. And yeah, I hope everyone's doing great. So I'm gonna ramble. I'm gonna call it a night. So I will see you guys in the next video, whenever it is. And until then, take care, everybody. Bye.